Good morning, everyone. Today is a super sad day for me because a great legend, Bruce Swedien, one of my all-time idols, has died. Now, he lived a long and full life, so there's nothing wrong there. But I just wanted to take the moment to share with you why this man has meant so much to me and his impact on the greater world, and then you'll understand why I am talking about this and why we need to discuss this person. So Bruce Swedien was a mix engineer, in my opinion, one of the greatest mix engineers that's ever lived on the face of planet Earth. And you don't know what a mix engineer is, maybe, but they're a person who takes a demo and they turn it into a finished product. So they take these raw, unpolished sounds and they turn it into that massive 3D soundscape that sounds like a hit record. Very few people on Earth have made more amazing sounding hit records and done more for creating and crafting sonic landscapes than Bruce Swedien did in his life. In addition to some of the greatest funk records of all time, you know him best from working on all of Michael Jackson's hits. Yes, all of Thriller and so many more of those records that sound unbelievable if you listen to them today. Go ahead, take today, put Thriller on high quality headphones and see what I'm talking about here. This is not something that is just good. It's not something that's just okay. It is beyond belief amazing in its three-dimensionality. And obviously, we've got a lot of hate and negative feelings around Michael Jackson, but people forget he didn't make these records in a void. And I feel like it's such a disservice to all of the talented people that worked on these records to say, I'm never listening to Thriller again, when he was just one piece of that. So today is not about Michael Jackson. It's about the man who is responsible for so many of his hits, Bruce Swedien. Now, this book is with me here in my studio at all times. This book is one of the greatest things I've ever read, and I've followed Bruce Swedien's life for so long. So I'm going to share with you some of the lessons learned from Bruce Swedien and some of the ideas that he taught me and others that have profoundly shaped the way that we all think about music, whether you know it or not. What modern mix engineers of this era think of as good was shaped by what this man did, and we wouldn't have modern hits without what he did. So he came from the old school. He was making records in the 50s and the 60s, so he was a multi-generational mixer. He made records 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and he was mixing up until basically the day that he died. He had some of the most amazing ears ever to grace a human being. So he understood the old school of mixing jazz, and he understood the modern pop records of the 80s and that big three-dimensional sound that defined the best records of that era and of the vinyl era. So some of the lessons that we learned from him, well, when he was recording jazz, he always tried to think about what goes into the microphone. He always tried to think about what can I do to create unique effects within the microphone without resorting to things like outboard effects or what we would call today plugins like delays or reverb. He always tried to think, what can I do to capture something more amazing? Case in point, for a certain jazz record, he would have the trombone player facing into a corner very far away from the microphone, blowing away from the microphone, so that the reverberation of that trombonist off of the back wall and 20, 30 feet away from the microphone would create a unique sonic landscape that would add a texture to the record. Now, he was one of the first people that started thinking about audio in this way. How do we capture it in some unique manner? Other things that he did, he was really a champion of using stereo microphone pairs. So if you take two microphones and you offset them at a certain axis, and what he called a Blumline pair, well, not he called, but what he used was called a Blumline pair, you get stereo recording instead of mono recording, which means you can create three-dimensionality with stereo speakers. So if you want to hear the effect of this, just listen to the opening of Thriller, those footsteps walking. That is recorded in stereo, and if you listen on great headphones, you can see this incredible three-dimensional sonic landscape around you. You can actually see the feet walking. That's because he was so committed to recording in stereo. Today, a lot of people record in mono, which means they have one microphone for their vocalist. But with one microphone, you'll never get that three-dimensionality. So instead of just panning things left and right or adding reverb, he tried to make things more three-dimensional when he was capturing the sound, which is something that very few people do to this day. So another case in point, let's say he had a orchestra, let's say he had a choir in some of those Michael Jackson recordings. He would have stereo mics placed such that the choir would wrap around the listener. And if you listen, you can hear them on all sides. It's not just like there's somebody on the left, there's somebody on the right, here's somebody in the center. No, it's a three-dimensional wrapping around of orchestras, of choirs, of all of these kinds of things. And he was such a minimalist when it came to things done after the recording. And that's something that he really, really brought to the table. He had an impressive array of microphones, every microphone under the sun, and he would always suit the microphone to the source. So he would use this for a vocal, or this for a kick drum, or this for a snare, and he was never afraid to try unusual pairs, unusual combos, stereo microphones here, mono microphones there. And so many of those iconic sounds that we now remember from our childhood, he crafted those when they didn't exist before. Case in point, you all know the opening beats, the opening drums of those Michael Jackson songs. You know, that snare is so iconic. You hear that, you immediately know what's happening. Well, how did he do these? He put things like cinder blocks in kick drums of a drum kit. He put towels in the drum kit, and then he would elevate this thing on rafters. He was trying to find all kinds of ways in real physical space to mangle the sound of a drum kit. And the result is this really instantly, iconically understandable kick drum, snare drum that you know immediately when that record comes on that this is a different kick drum and a different snare drum than in any other record. That's the identifiable part, the sonic signature that he imbued into all of the music that he worked on. And he worked so hard to do that. People would ask him stuff like, you know, on the line, "Don't think twice." What effects did you put on that? Did you put some kind of crazy reverb or a plate reverb or some sort of delay? And the answer was no. He didn't do anything like that. Instead, what he did was he had Michael sing through a long cardboard tube. I think it was like a 10-foot long tube. And that created that unique echo effect. He was all about capturing it at the microphone with the right microphone in the right room and doing all of this. I mean, to say that he was thinking about this stuff at a level beyond anybody is an understatement. And again, to this day, there are very few engineers on planet Earth that attempt even half of the stuff that he was attempting in the 70s and in the 80s. And part of the reason why you can listen to his records, and I have a playlist for Bruce Swedien on Spotify that I've been keeping that you should listen to, part of the reason that that holds up and that we love those records is because he was doing things that nobody else has done since then. Listen to Thriller. You don't hear that sound and that depth and dimensionality in modern records. You just don't. Other than, you know, say, for example, Serban Gena, who I believe is my modern mix hero. But Bruce Swedien shaped my life in so many ways. He set the bar so high. His records still sound immaculate to this day. And if there's one person that really changed the way that I think about music and recording and mixing records, it is Bruce Swedien. So I wanted to share that with you because, you know, he will be missed. Now, again, he lived a long and very productive and fruitful life. So there's nothing really to be sad about today other than just to celebrate the life of this person who impacted all of us so much, whether we know it or not. And he impacted all of us with the music that all of the world has heard. He has to have sold more records with his mixes than pretty much anybody on the face of the planet ever did. More hits, more life-changing music than anybody. And I'll leave you with one other tip. Again, with his minimalism, today people compress things, they distort things. That's the modern sound. But again, he was so all about recording that he never really used much compression or any effects. He always wanted to get things right so that he just had to move the faders and that would create his sonic world. And he only could do that because he captured things so well. Less is more. And of course, his ears were the best that have ever existed. Those records still sound so good, whether it's loud at a festival, whether it's quiet. And he introduced me to the Oratone speaker, my favorite speaker of all time, and one that I mix on every single day. So thank you, Bruce Swedien, for everything you have done for me and for all audio engineers everywhere. Thank you for sharing everything that you have learned. Thank you for being an inspiration, and you will definitely be missed. R.I.P. Bruce Swedien.